Hey, my name is Jamie Arndt, and in today's lesson, I'm going to show you 3 scales to build tension over the 5 chord in a 2-5-1. I like to think of the 2-5-1 progression like a little story, like a novel or a movie or a plot. The 2 chord is where we introduce the characters and get to know the situation. The 5 chord is that big moment of tension, everything's blowing up and the bad person's trying to get away with their evil plan. And the 1 chord is our resolution. We land back at home. So a 2-5-1 in the key of C, we have D minor 7 as our 2 chord, G7 as our 5 chord, and C major 7 as our 1 chord. Now, all 3 of these chords are diatonic to the key of C, right? They all exist in the key of C. And if you need to review your diatonic chords, I'll link my diatonic chords video below. So hundreds of years ago in classical music, the 5 chord was a really dissonant sounding chord. And its job is to resolve back to our tonic chord, back to our 1 chord. That's why in classical music you hear these sorts of cadences. But now, hundreds of years later, we can hear a G7 chord. And it doesn't sound like it really needs to go anywhere because we're used to the blues and funk and all these styles of music where we hang on a static dominant 7 chord. So in order to give more tension to this dominant 7 chord, we're going to add 4 notes that live outside of this diatonic key. Those notes are going to be the flat 5, the sharp 5, the flat 9, and the sharp 9. These are also known as the altered tones. I also did a video on the altered scale and altered chords. If this is something that you need to review, I'd go ahead and check that video, open it up in a new tab, I'll link it below, and then come back to this video. So we're going to look at 3 different scales we can use to bring out a little tension and dissonance using those altered tones. These 3 different scales contain some or all of the altered tones in addition to the chord tones of a 5 chord, in this case G7, as well as some of the extensions, the 9s, the 11s, and the 13s that belong in the key. But with these outside notes, we'll create that tension that then resolves nicely back to the 1 chord. So when we land on our 1 chord, our C major, it's going to sound final and it's going to sound like we really made it. And whether or not the band is playing these altered tones, it's great to be able to throw them in. But more often than not, if you're playing with somebody who's familiar with the jazz vocabulary, they'll be throwing these altered tones into their chordal playing as well. So for this video, our whole approach to playing over a 2-5-1 will be playing D Dorian over the 2 chord, one of our 3 altered scales over this G7 altered chord, and then C major or C Ionian over the 1 chord. This is not the only way to play, but this is what we're going to be focusing on just to look at these 3 scales that contain those altered notes. So let's go ahead and take a look at 3 different scales, and I'll give you 3 different 2-5-1 line examples. And by the way, all of these examples are available in PDF form in both tab and standard notation on my Patreon page, where I also have lots of other exclusive lessons, transcriptions from my YouTube video, behind the scenes, and live Q&As. So please check the link below and follow me on Patreon if you'd like a PDF of this lesson. All right, let's get into it. So the first scale we're going to look at is the G altered scale, and it goes something like this. So if we look at the notes in that scale, we have our root, G, A flat is our flat 9, B flat is our sharp 9, B natural is the major 3rd, there's a chord tone of our G7, D flat is the flat 5, D sharp is the sharp 5, F is the flatted 7. So we get the chord tones G, B, and F, and then we get our 4 altered tones. So this is a really great scale to bring out the sound of the altered chord when you're playing over the 5 chord, and you're going to get those altered notes. It's going to bring out some tension, so when you land back on the 1 chord, it'll sound final. And I also addressed this in my 2-5-1 beginner video. We talked about if you play over a 2-5-1 just using the diatonic C major scale, it'll work over all of it, but you can't really hear the changes, and really more often than not, jazz musicians will use these altered tones to bring tension. So let's go ahead and look at the first lick example. I'm going to go ahead and play it, and then we'll break it down. So over the 2 chord, I'm just thinking D Dorian, right? That's the scale that's going to fit over a D minor 7 chord. And my little line is Pretty simple line here. D, E, F, G, A, C, B, A. Now we're going to get into our little alter lick because now we're playing over the 5 chord. So if you're playing over a 5 chord, this is a great chord voicing to use. A G7 with a sharp 5 and a sharp 9. And my little line over this chord is going to be. So that's A flat, the flat 9, F the flat 7, D sharp, the sharp 5. So we get an alter tone, a chord tone, an alter tone. There's my major third, there's the third of the chord, down to B flat. So we're going from B to B flat. That's the sharp 9. A flat is the flat 9, to the root, chord tone, to the flat 7. And then we're going to resolve to E, which is the third of C major. And then we have this little lick over C major. So our lick over C major, we're starting on an E to G to B. So that's the third, the fifth, the seventh, up to the ninth, D, back to the seventh, B, to C, to E, to G. And then with my pinky here, I'm going to grab the major 7 here at the 7th fret of the high E string. So my whole line in slow motion. Now this line is all 8th notes, and I put it that way just to really demonstrate all the possibilities of notes and tones that'll fit over this chord. But when you play, you might want to experiment with a little bit of phrasing and leaving some space. And I like to slide into that last note there, that B. Gives it a little bit of flavor. So that lick is really great because you get those alter tones, flat 9. There's a chord tone, the flat 7. Alter tone, the sharp 5. Chord tone, the third. Alter tone, the sharp 9. Alter tone, the flat 9. Chord tone, the root. Chord tone, the flat 7. And then we resolve to C major. All right, the second scale we're going to look at is the half whole diminished, sometimes called the dominant diminished scale. And this is a symmetrical scale, meaning the intervals between all the notes in the scale are the same. It's a pattern, and in this case, it's a half step and then a whole step. So if we start on the G, right, the root of our chord, and the reason we can play a form of a diminished scale over an altered 5 chord, if we play a G7 and we throw the flat 9 on top, that G7 flat 9 contains a diminished chord. This is an F diminished chord, but if I put a G in there, it's all the same notes of a G7 flat 9. That's why we can use this half whole diminished scale, and it's just going to be up a half step, then up a whole step. So we go from G to A flat, to B flat, to B natural, to D flat, to D, to E, to F, to G, to A flat, to B flat, to B natural, to D flat, to D natural, to E natural, to F, to G, to A flat, to B flat. Because it's a symmetrical scale, and a diminished scale specifically, that means we can move this shape up a minor third or 3 frets up to B flat. Same shape, and it's all the same notes, just starting on a B flat. And you can do that in minor thirds. So this same lick that we're about to learn, you can use in all those different places, same fingering, just up 3 frets. The same way you can slide a diminished chord up 3 frets, and it's just going to be the same notes, they just rearrange the order. So we got root, flat 9, sharp 9, third, flatted 5th, natural 5th, 6th or 13th, flat 7, root. So we don't get all the altered tones, but in exchange we get some more natural tones, including that 13th. So here's our lick. All right, so let's break this lick down. We're gonna start out with the same D Dorian lick that we played in the first example. So here we're gonna start with our flat 9. I'm using my second finger on the 4th fret of the high E string. Flat 9, then on the B string, I'm going to the 6th fret with my pinky. That's our flat 7, our 13th, and our 5th. That's 6th fret, 5th fret, 3rd fret. And right down the scale, there's my flat 5, D flat, there's my 3rd, B natural, there's my B flat, that's the sharp 9, A flat is the flat 9, and then over the C chord, we're actually going to resolve to G, which is the 5th of the C chord, and then play C major from there. So far we have... And then we get to C. Here's a different C major idea. This time we're going all the way up to D. We're playing G. I'm going to use my second finger here. Then my pinky. G, G, A, B, D, C. I'm going to swap in my first finger there. And then hop my first finger over to this E, 5th fret of the B string. G, 8th fret of the B string. Here's the B, that's the 7th fret of the high E string. And I'm going to slide that all the way up to the D, that's at the 10th fret of the high E string. Nice little C major lick. That's the 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th, root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. So our whole lick slowly. And again, a little faster with the track. So the final scale we're going to look at is the whole tone scale. This is another symmetrical scale, and it's built entirely of whole steps, or going up every 2 frets. Here's the fingering of our G whole tone scale. And there I'm going all the way up the full range of the position, all the way up to B. The whole tone scale has this sort of dreamy sound. You often hear it in cartoons when they go into a dream sequence and it sort of blurs. The spaces between those whole steps really give it that flavor. It's also often associated with some of the things that Thelonious Monk played, big user of the whole tone scale. And now this fingering is pretty cool. If we're thinking of G as our root, we're going to think of the fingers 1, 2, 4, but we're actually skipping its whole steps. So it's 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret. Then the next string is going to be 4th fret, 6th fret, then back to 3, 5, 7, then 4, 6, 4, 6, 3, 5, 7. And because this is a symmetrical scale, you can play the same thing starting on an A, a whole step, or 2 frets higher, B, so on and so forth. It's going to be the same notes because they're all a whole step away. So you can start the scale a whole step, and it's going to be the same notes, just starting on 2 frets higher or a whole step higher. So here's our lick example. So let's break that lick down. Once again, we're using the same little D Dorian for our 2 chord. Now we're going to drop down to G, our root, F, our flat 7. Here's our sharp 5, D flat. Here's our flat 5, D flat, to B natural, to G the root, F the flat 7, E flat, which is the sharp 5. We could also call it D sharp. If we're thinking of the 5, it's a D sharp. And we're going to slide that into E natural. So we get this little enclosure, a very bebop kind of idea. The flat 7 of G, the sharp 5, into the 3rd of C. So the whole lick over the G7, the whole tone lick, or the entire whole tone lick, and then when we get to that E, we're going to do the same C major scale, C Ionian lick from the first example. So you get something like this. Here it is slowly. And you can hear, even without the track, you can hear those changes. You can hear the tension of dissonance, and then the resolution when we get to our 1 chord. The best advice I can give you is not to just learn these scales, and when you hit an altered chord, play these altered scales, the altered scale, the whole tone scale, or the half whole diminished scale. But instead, think about using them to create melodies, because that's the whole idea when you're improvising, is you're just coming up with new melodies to that previously existing song or chord changes. You're just doing it on the spot. And when I learn these scales, I like to then go back and listen to some of my favorite jazz improvisers, Charlie Parker, Sonny Stitt, Grant Green, Wes Montgomery, Oscar Peterson, and see how they approach playing over the 5 chord and see if I can identify some of these scales being used. These scales that have a combination of chord tones, extensions of the chords, all the diatonic notes, and then these outside altered tones. And if you'd like the PDF of all of these examples in both tab and standard notation, follow me on Patreon, where you can get that as well as all the other lessons I've posted there. If you like this, please follow me, subscribe, follow for more guitar lessons, gear demos, and performances. And let me know what you think in the comments. I hope to see you in the next video. Once again, my name is Jamie Arent. Thanks for watching.